Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we have a story of betrayal, deception, and the unexpected path to justice. Imagine trusting someone completely only to discover that the person you loved and the brother you trusted had been hiding a painful truth from you. This is the story of a man whose life was turned upside down by betrayal, but through strength and determination, he fought back to reclaim everything he lost. It's a journey of self-discovery, revenge, and ultimately, freedom. Let's dive into the story today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more life-changing stories. I stood there, at the altar, palms slick with sweat, heart hammering in my chest. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but in that moment, everything felt surreal. Sarah, my bride, looked like an angel, her white dress clinging to her like it was made just for her. Her smile lit up the room, her eyes locked on mine, as though I were the only man she saw. It had been 2 years since we'd met, and every moment of that time had led us to this day, our wedding day. My brother, David, the best man, elbowed me with a grin, his voice just loud enough for the front row to hear. "You're a lucky guy, Luke," he whispered, and I couldn't help but smile back, believing it in my heart. The vows came easily. Forever felt like a promise carved in stone, sealed with a kiss that tasted like hope and anticipation. I had no idea then, no clue at all, that what I thought was the beginning of something beautiful would soon crumble. The reception, with its toasts and laughter, blurred in my mind. My brother took the microphone in his slightly tipsy state and gave a speech about how I was always the older sibling who had it all my business, my life. Everyone laughed. I clapped him on the back. The night should have been perfect, a night I thought we'd remember forever. Sarah danced with me, her body close to mine, her laugh soft and warm in my ear. It was the start of something real, something we both had been waiting for. That night, we stumbled into our new home, now ours. The exhaustion from the day seemed to vanish as we entered the space we'd create together. I reached for her, expecting the closeness we'd built over months of dating, expecting the warmth and intimacy we'd shared before. But she pulled away sharply. "Not tonight, Luke," she said, her voice cold and distant. "My body, my choice." I froze, confused. I didn't know how to respond. Was she tired? Was the wedding just too much? I told myself that it was nothing to worry about, that weddings are stressful, that she would come around. But night after night, the rejection continued. Each time I leaned in, hoping for a spark, she turned cold, her arms crossed, her eyes anywhere but on me. "My body, my choice," she'd repeat, like a mantra carved in stone, each word a brick in a wall I couldn't break through. It stuck. The emotional distance began to feel like a constant presence between us. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what had gone wrong. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? Was she regretting the marriage already? Every attempt I made to talk to her, to ask if she was okay, was met with the same response. "I'm fine," she'd snap before burying herself in her phone, tapping away at the screen late into the night. I would ask her who she was texting, and she'd brush it off. Work, she'd say too quickly, too flat. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust her, but the doubt gnawed at me. Days turned into weeks. The distance between us grew. She began spending long hours away from home, running errands. She never seemed to explain, returning with no clear answers. And when she returned, I'd catch glimpses of her smiling at her phone, a secret smile that I no longer shared with her. At dinner, she picked at her food, offering grunts of fine whenever I asked how her day had been. I started noticing things I had ignored before, things I couldn't ignore any longer. She'd linger over questions about my finances, my construction business, my savings. "Just curious," she'd say with a shrug, but the way she asked felt off, like she was cataloging me instead of caring. David had been around more than usual. I had given him a job at my company a year ago as a project manager. He was paid decently, and I thought it was a good fit. But lately, he'd been showing up unannounced, saying he needed to check in about work. He'd flop onto the couch, crack open a beer, and ask about Sarah, like it was a joke. "How's the wife treating you?" He'd smirk, and I'd laugh it off, saying she was still settling in. But his eyes flicked to her whenever she walked by, and she'd give him a tight, quick smile one she never gave me anymore. I tried to brush it off. Brothers and wives get along, right? But something nodded me. By the end of the first month, I was a wreck. I couldn't sleep anymore. I spent my nights staring at the ceiling while she typed away on her phone, the blue light casting eerie shadows on the wall. I stopped reaching for her. Rejection stings less when you stop trying. But the pain was still there, deep inside. I started questioning everything. What was happening? Why had she pulled away so suddenly? Did she even love me anymore? I decided to confront her. I had to know what was going on. It had been a month since we'd gotten married, and I couldn't take it any longer. The coldness from Sarah had shifted from uncomfortable to unbearable. Each time I tried to engage with her, whether it was a casual conversation or even an attempt to reach out, she recoiled. It felt like I was living with a stranger, not the woman I had pledged my life to. The warmth, the affection gone. The intimacy I thought we'd share, non-existent. The connection we'd once had, a distant memory. One night, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Sarah had already gone to bed, her phone resting on the nightstand, buzzing periodically as messages came in. I could hear her breathing softly under the covers, and I sat there in the dark, listening to the rhythmic sound of her breath. The phone buzzed again, and again. I stood up and paced the room. I knew I shouldn't snoop, but the feeling of something being hidden was consuming me. Trust was the foundation of any relationship, and yet, trust felt like it was slipping through my fingers. It felt wrong to check her phone, but it also felt wrong to remain in the dark. What was she hiding? Why had she become so distant? The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Slowly, I reached for it. My hands trembled as I unlocked the screen, careful not to make any noise. The message on the screen made my heart skip a beat. It was from a name I didn't recognize. Militars, the message simply said, "All good." I stared at it, trying to make sense of it, but my mind was racing. It could have been anyone, Michelle from her old job, her cousin Maria, even a friend. But the gut feeling that had been gnawing at me all month screamed that it was something more. I set the phone back down gently, my mind spinning with questions. Who was M? Why was she keeping this from me? The quiet hum of her phone, now resting on the nightstand, was the only sound in the room, and it felt like it was mocking me. I had to know more. I decided to follow her the next time she left the house for her mysterious errands. It wasn't long before I got the chance. One evening, Sarah announced that she had to run to the store, though I noticed she hadn't given a clear reason for the errand this time. She grabbed her keys, threw on her jacket, and walked out the door without a second glance. A wave of suspicion swept over me as I quietly slipped into my car and followed her. I kept my distance, careful not to be seen. Sarah's car wound through the streets, and after several turns, she pulled into a quiet park on the edge of town. I parked a block away, my stomach in knots. It was a place I had never seen her visit before, a place with no lights, no people, nothing but trees and shadows. I watched as she got out of her car, and then I saw him. It was Jake, my brother, stepping out of his truck. My heart stopped. What was he doing here? They walked toward each other, and without any hesitation, they kissed. A deep, desperate kiss, like they had done this many times before. I felt the world tilt beneath me as the truth came crashing down. My wife, my brother, together. The betrayal stung more than anything I could have imagined. The anger was there, but it wasn't the first emotion to hit me. No, it was the crushing sense of disbelief. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. They had been lying to me for so long, weaving their deception in plain sight. I had been living with this false sense of happiness while they had been playing me for a fool. I didn't confront them then. I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I sat there, numb, letting the weight of it all sink in. The pain felt sharp, but more than anything, I was angry at myself for being so blind. I had trusted them both, Sarah, my wife, and Jake, my brother. And in that moment, they both betrayed me in ways I couldn't even begin to process. I drove home that night with a mind full of questions and a heart full of fury. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let this go. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. The drive home was a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The images of Sarah and Jake, locked in each other's arms, played on repeat in my mind. I couldn't shake the sight of them together, the betrayal cutting deeper with each passing second. My mind raced through the possibilities, the lies, the deceit. What had I missed? How had I been so blind? The questions consumed me. But one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let them get away with this. The next few days felt like a blur. My mind was fixed on one thing: gathering proof. I couldn't confront Sarah, yet not without solid evidence. I needed to know exactly what had been happening behind my back. I began paying closer attention to her every move. Every time she left the house, I made sure to note the time, to track her movements. And when she wasn't around, I sifted through anything I could get my hands on: phone records, bank statements, text messages, whatever I could find that would confirm my worst fears. It wasn't long before I found something. I logged into our shared phone account and found dozens of calls to Jake's cell phone. Some of them were hours long, most of them happening at night, while I was asleep or out of the house. My stomach turned as I printed out the records. I knew I had to confront her. I had to know how deep the lies ran. One evening, when Sarah was in the shower, I noticed her phone left unattended on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't check it felt like a violation, but I had to. I glanced at the screen, and there it was, another text from Jake. This one read, "We're getting close. Just keep playing him. He won't suspect a thing." My blood ran cold. My heart dropped. The web of lies had been spun so tightly, and I had been none the wiser. I had been a fool. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning something, and I had been the mark all along. That night, I didn't confront Sarah immediately. Instead, I decided to gather more evidence. I needed something irrefutable. I spent hours scouring our finances, looking for anything unusual. That's when I found the withdrawals. Small amounts at first, but they started to add up. Sarah had been siphoning money from our joint account, making vague purchases that had no receipts or clear explanation. I also found texts in our cloud backup, some of them dating back before the wedding. One text from Jake read, "He's loaded. Stick it out," and another from Sarah, "I'll get what I can." I felt like the walls were closing in. This wasn't just an affair, it was a scam. They had been playing me for a fool all along, using me for my money. I knew I had to take action. The next day, I called my lawyer Greg. I explained everything to him: what I had found, what I had seen, and what I suspected. Greg didn't hesitate for a second. He told me we had a case. It was clear that Sarah had married me under false pretenses, that she had been lying from the start. He started drawing up the paperwork for the annulment, and I spent the next few days gathering everything I could: texts, photos, phone records, bank statements. Every piece of evidence was crucial. I didn't confront Sarah yet. I knew she'd start to get paranoid if I did. I watched her closely, trying to keep my emotions in check. She had no idea that I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I was in control now, and I wasn't going to let her get the better of me. The day came when Greg filed the annulment papers. He served Sarah with the documents at the house, and I wasn't there when it happened. I wanted to stay away, to let her process it in her own way. But the next morning, I heard from Greg Sarah had countersued. She claimed that I had forced her into the marriage, that I had manipulated her into signing the prenup. It was a bold move, but I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I knew she was lying, and I had the proof to back it up. That was when the real battle began. But I wasn't backing down. I had learned the truth about Sarah, about Jake, and about myself. They thought they could manipulate me, break me, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't just going to let this go. It was time for me to take back control, to reclaim my life. The court hearing came quickly, and I walked in, my mind clear and focused. Sarah had pulled out all the stops, trying to paint herself as the victim, claiming I had coerced her into everything: our marriage, the prenup, everything. But Greg was ready. He had meticulously gathered the evidence, and when the judge went through the photos, the phone records, and the financial documents, it was impossible for Sarah to continue her story. Her lies crumbled right there in front of her. The judge ruled in my favor. No alimony, no payout. Sarah stormed out of the courtroom, her face twisted in anger and defeat, Jake trailing behind her like a kicked dog. I felt nothing in that moment, no joy, no triumph, just a quiet relief. I had been tested, betrayed by the people I trusted most, but now I was free, free from their lies, free from the manipulation. The fallout didn't stop there. Sarah's social media posts flooded the internet, painting her as a victim in a loveless marriage. She even tried to drag Jake into it, but I wasn't having it. I posted the screenshots of their texts, showing how they had planned everything. The truth spread fast. Her followers turned on her, and Jake lost every job opportunity in town. The lies had been exposed, and there was no going back. As for me, I was rebuilding. My company, my life, my sense of self. I wasn't the same person I had been before. Stronger, wiser, more aware of the deceit that can hide behind a smile. The people who had betrayed me were no longer in my life, and while the pain still lingered, I knew I had come out the other side. This was the end of that chapter for me, and the beginning of something new. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell to stay updated with new life stories. We'll see you in the next video.